Hey now, we are getting over, and I am the Silver King, Adam Silverstein, here to lead you through these hard times. With episode 605 of your favorite professional wrestling podcast. That's right, Getting Over is back once again, and it is Thursday, so you know exactly what that means. We are here to break down everything that happened over the last week across NXT and AEW. And if you cannot tell already, the Silver King is still very much under the weather. We will talk more about that coming up. But what I will tell you is I did the absolute best I could to cover NXT and AEW, all 7 combined hours of those shows. That way we could bring you the podcast this week. On that note, let's kick it off as we normally do with a reminder that the Getting Over Wrestling podcast
is all about Defy.
So please remember to head on over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Leave a 5-star rating on Apple. Take a little extra time. Leave a 5-star written review. If you do, we will read it live right here on the show. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Getting Overcast for episode drops, news, analysis, highlights, all that good stuff. You can also send in questions and comments for the show on Twitter at Getting Overcast. And please also remember,
I happen to love the number 5.
And I hope you do as well. For $5 a month or $50 for the entire year, you can become an official Getting Overhead. Just visit buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Sign up. You will get bonus audio, instant reactions to Raw, NXT Dynamite, and SmackDown every single week, along with exclusive news posts on Friday. Again, that is buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. So as I kind of mentioned off the top right there, Silver King not feeling well. The fact of the matter is I have COVID, third time I've had it. Second time, it has cost me a work trip / vacation, whatever you want to call it. I was planning to spend actually 12 days in North Carolina to go to the US Open, to visit Asheville, North Carolina, which is number 1 on my list of places that I want to visit in the United States, actually, now that I think about it. And I was going to go to Charlotte for the first time as well. I was very excited to do the trip. And less than 48 hours before I was set to leave, got hit with COVID. You can tell it's in my voice. You can tell probably it's in my head. And it's been very difficult to do the show over the last couple of days. The good news is things seem to be getting a little bit better. And by the time we roll around for the weekend, hopefully I can enjoy WWE Clash at the Castle and have a clear head while I do it. But yeah, this week has been tough. And therefore, the way I wrote notes for and reviewed NXT and AEW is slightly different. I don't know if you're going to notice it that much. I just tried to be shorter, pretty much, on everything. And even taping this podcast, the reason it came out so late on Thursday is I did it in multiple parts. It was kind of tough to sit down and do the show all in one sitting. So I appreciate everyone's patience. And obviously, I'm here to give you the best show possible. I'll also give you a little tease. By the time we get to our show, maybe Saturday, almost certainly on Tuesday, there's going to be another distribution platform for the Getting Over Wrestling podcast, one I think that you all have been waiting for some time. It's not going to be exactly what we hoped it would be, at least on launch, but we have something pretty cool coming up. So that's a little tease. Maybe we'll have it for you Saturday, more likely on Tuesday, but just keep your ears peeled for that. I guess keep your ears open. I don't think you can peel ears like you can eyes. Regardless, let's not waste any more time or any of my breath or energy. Let's go ahead and break down everything that happened this week across NXT and AEW. We will start with NXT, which was coming off NXT Battleground. Then we will tackle AEW, which of course is building toward its Forbidden Door show in conjunction with New Japan Pro Wrestling. Remember that there are timestamps in the episode descriptions, so if you want, you can jump back and forth between one brand or the other, but as always, I hope you listen to the entire show. Now, coming off a premium live event or pay-per-view, oftentimes we do a second look. Again, didn't have much time or energy to do that this week. There were a couple notes I did jot down. Listening back to the instant analysis for NXT Battleground, I realized that I forgot to mention. So I'll just go ahead and give you those right now. Then we'll get into NXT for the week. Rewatching the end of the NXT Underground match, I still feel the same way about the finish as I did on Sunday when we discussed it. But I did forget to note how downright hysterical it was to see Lola Vice basically throwing ass literal seconds after knocking out Shayna Baszler. It's almost like she's a video game character. like from Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter or something else, where knocks out the opponent, immediately does the celebration. I just found that to be really funny. Also, regarding that match, it is wild that Shayna Lola was better in every conceivable way than Baszler and Ronda Rousey. It's exactly what that match should have been. There was a great shot of Michin smiling like a proud parent when Kalani Jordan celebrated with the women's North American title while sitting on top of the ladder. And lastly, Oro Mensah attacked Ethan Page after Battleground, just like he did after NXT last Tuesday. But there really wasn't much follow-up on that, which I found interesting. So that was my second look, if you want to call it, my brief second look for NXT Battleground. I'm sure there's more I wish to say. Again, I just didn't really have the time to do the rewatch, given everything that was happening with me this week. When it comes to NXT, so Cody Rhodes opened hour 2 of NXT, and this was promoted a bit. I think during Battleground, he sent a tweet, and they talked about it on Raw. They said he was going to be on the show, but I don't necessarily believe it was made that big of a deal because it was known that he wasn't going to do much. But he opened hour 2 with Vic Joseph informing us this marked 9 years to the day of Dusty Rhodes' death, which certainly did not realize. Cody ran down AJ Styles' impressive resume. He promised to add him, saying, "I quit to it." Trick Williams came out looking fly with these really bright white boots, saying they both have chips on their shoulders and huge mountains to climb to get to the top. He asked Cody for advice on going from being the hunter to being the hunted. Rhodes said that there's always another mountain for Williams to climb, lightly suggesting the WWE title, and he had a smirk on his face. Cody then said Ava gave him the authority to announce Trick's next challenger. Though he didn't actually announce the challenger, he announced the number 1 contendership, a 25-man battle royal, including folks from other rosters. Trick stopped Cody right before he left. He said he had an important question, so he asked Rhodes to come to his July 4th cookout, or the, I should say, July 4th cookout, and of course, Cody accepted. Now, that obviously plays into the memes of, Cody being for black folks and stuff like that, if that makes sense. I'm not going to get into all that today. Those of you who are on the IWC know exactly what that's all about. This segment, though, I thought was a bit confusing, not so much from the standpoint of what was said, but rather what was not said. Like, Rhodes originally said he was going to be there to deliver a gift, and simply announcing a battle royal is no gift. There was no interaction with Ethan Page or Shawn Spears, as was teased, and Cody did even less here than his last NXT appearance. So I figured he'd announce the Women's Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic or something like that. But no. And yes, I realize I said all of this, and I realize what happened later in the show. I'm sharing my mindset at the time this segment concluded. As far as the Battle Royal, look, having some mid-carders from Raw or SmackDown, it'll be exciting, not immensely notable. What would make the other roster tease truly exciting is if 1 or 2 TNA folks wound up competing. There were teases on both Raw and NXT referencing Joe Hendry from TNA, so he could definitely be one of those folks popping over, but again, we don't necessarily know as of right now. JC Jane and Jasmine Nix were frustrated about something backstage when Cody found JC and said he had something for her. Out of a paper bag, he handed over his old dashing Cody Rhodes mask, with JC completely starstruck by it as a presumed replacement for her really strange jet black crow-style mask that she's been wearing since her broken nose. Okay, so Cody did deliver a gift, after all. Never would have guessed it would have been the dashing mask to JC Jane. And there's no way that fits JC in my head, right? Super random interaction that could not have been predicted if given 1,000 chances to guess it. Then we had Dante Chen against Lexis King in a Singapore cane match. This was the first such match held by WWE in 15 years. There were some damn brutal shots both ways. Chen got body slammed into a pile of canes. King put one in his throat and then stuck one in a turnbuckle facing outward. Chen ran him into it, exploded a cane on King with a dozen shots, hit him with a tope suicida cane to the throat. King grabbed his scepter, low-blowed Chen with it, hit him a few more times, and then hit Coronation with the scepter on his throat for the 1-2-3. This was so much better than expected. Not so much from a wrestling standpoint. It was 75% or more cane shots, but it was just brutal. Chen was bloodied and bruised everywhere, and it was really smart to use like a different type of cane in the finish, with King kind of outsmarting Chen. Super entertaining match, and King basically got his win back after Chen went 2-0 in regulation matches against him. I went 3.75 stars, B+ for this. I found it immensely entertaining. Again, not just from a pure wrestling standpoint, just from a overall entertaining wrestling match standpoint. Javon Evans fought Shawn Spears. Evans was bouncing all over the place here. Also didn't see any of the hand clapping BS that we talked about last week. That was a huge positive. He took a big super kick on the apron and a top rope draping DDT back inside from Spears. Evans came back with a double jump cutter, but Spears rolled out of the ring. So he attempted the same move near the announce table, but Spears moved out of the way and Evans hit the corner of the table. Spears took advantage of his injured ribs, hit C4 for the win. Evans also bit on a very fake blood capsule to kind of sell the impact of the table spot, but you could tell just by looking at his mouth how fake it was. Now, this is what I'm talking about when I say there's no harm in veterans going over clean against neophytes. It didn't even need the circumstances that were provided in terms of protection, but obviously I didn't have a problem with that. Spears bumped his ass off for Evans, and Javon again showed out in a major way. Kid is 19, immensely talented between the ropes. He should be able to put the entire package together in a couple of years, and then just watch out when he does. Just consider that like Braun Breaker is 7 years older than Javon. And he, along with Lyra, were the youngest call-ups in the WWE draft. So when you talk about Javon Evans, Roxanne Perez, Cora Jade, some of the other really young talent in NXT, it's crazy how young they are and how high of ceilings they have at this early juncture in their careers. So later we saw Spears, Page, and King all backstage running into Cody. And they all promised, hey, we're going to win the Battle Royal, get the NXT title shot, just like you did at the Royal Rumble to win the WWE title. Then Cody said, simply and coyly, seems like you all are in a good place. Obviously referring to NXT being a good place for them, the fact that all of them previously were in AEW. I thought it was a fun meta segment with a wink and a nod. They didn't take a shit on AEW. They didn't say that they were in a better place. He just said you're in a good place. The inference being a good place now. And sure, that's true for them so far. I think it's unquestioned that Lexus King is being booked better than he was there. Spears, it's been pretty much identical. I mean, he hasn't been there long. Ethan Page has only been there like 2 weeks. I was a little surprised that coming off of Battleground, where Page won and had an issue with the referee at the end of that, and the fact that he got beaten up by Oro Mensah twice, the end of NXT last week, and then after NXT Battleground on Sunday, that he didn't have his own segment on the show. He didn't do anything. He didn't come out for a promo. Thought that was a missed opportunity and kind of strange. Roxanne Perez arrived in the parking lot, confirming that she was going to address the state of the NXT women's division. Robert Stone came up to congratulate her and ask on behalf of Ava what she'll be talking about. Roxy said Ava can wait, like she had to wait for her Battleground opponent. Stone and Ava commiserated about this later. Stevie Turner came in saying she heard Roxy was going to call Ava out. And I was just like, what exactly is Stone's role? Is he the assistant GM to Ava? Why does she even need one? It feels like something better could have been found for him than this. She doesn't need a mouthpiece. The whole point of making her a GM is for her to speak and like get comfortable on the mic. So the whole thing is odd. Roxy was in the ring for the main event segment, bragging that no one in the world can measure up to her. Then she demanded Ava come to the ring and thank her for keeping the NXT title in NXT. Ava said being a great champion is not about what you say, but what you do, who you beat, and how you carry yourself. Perez promised she would find a way to beat whoever she puts in her way because no one can take the title from her. Out came JC, wearing Cody's dashing mask over her black mask, which was hysterical. With Jasmine, and the former said she got people watching NXT before Roxy ever existed on the brand, referring back to Toxic Attraction. Jasmine added that the biggest threats to Perez are in NXT, not elsewhere. Out came Lash Legend and Jakara Jackson saying it's on site now. Next was Lola Vice bragging about her NXT Underground win. So 6 heels out there together, all of them wearing black. A brawl starts, Roxy and Lola team up against the other pairs, and NXT goes off the air. Everyone watching this segment, I bet, was expecting something to happen. Some kind of surprise at the end, a match being made, anything, because that's what it felt like it was building up to. Instead, it was one lackluster entrance after another. And that's not to shit on the women who came out. They were just lackluster compared to the expectation of a surprise, whether from TNA or the WWE main roster or perhaps elsewhere. I saw people suggesting NXT promised a number one contender here. That is false. They never promised that. It was a state of the division segment. But again, they were all heels. So none of the entrances elicited a noticeable pop from the crowd. This was something you do to open a show. You don't do it in the main event. The women's division as a whole in NXT is strong, but the top of the card feels barren. and there are far too many heels. I'll repeat, there was zero reason to turn Fallon Henley heel when she was ready to pop off big time for a top-level babyface run. It feels like no one there as of today is believable to take down Roxy. Fallon is the one I believe could do it, but again, she's a heel. So this was a strangely conceptualized segment, a very odd booking idea, extremely poor decision to do this, and the show placement was horrendous. This did not belong in the main event. This was a rare miss by Shawn Michaels. He struck out swinging on 3 pitches on this one. Kalani Jordan opened NXT all dressed up with her new title, but she talked over the "you deserve it" chants. You're supposed to lay off the mic and let the crowd chant for you and soak it in and then continue talking. She was so focused on like reading her lines and like doing what she's scripted to do and not messing it up that she just had nothing else to her presentation, if that makes sense. She was all goody two-shoes, saying it was up to her to create a legacy for the title. Jada Parker interrupted, saying all Kalani did was climb the ladder quickly, and she would be her number 1 contender after she beats Mi Chin. So Mia Yim charged from behind, attacked her, and that led to the bell. So Mi Chin against Parker. Mi Chin looked good early with some high-intensity offense and a nice German suplex. Jada came back with her cake taunt and the LeBron James taunt. Then she plowed Mi Chin out of the ring with her hip check, with the Good Brothers running down to check on her. Carl Anderson stole a chair from Jada, with Mi Chin catching her in a pinning combination for the win. Jada later complained to Out the Mud about the loss. They took responsibility for not coming down. She said she wanted to handle business and promised to run Mi Chin out of NXT. Kind of annoying because it was a strong match with good business being done. Both women were doing quality work, and it ended with a heel team helping someone who to this point was a babyface former partner. Mi Chin, a main roster superstar, should be able to beat Parker on her own. And there should be nothing wrong with Jada, a neophyte still, losing to her. I don't understand. This is what I was mentioning earlier. It was cool that Spears beat Evans regularly. I don't understand the NXT booking, of late especially, where the veterans either lose or need excuses to win. It was also nonsensical that OTM was nowhere to be seen, especially once the OC came out. As for Kalani at the start, the promo was nothing special at all. Jada has like 50 times the personality and charisma of Lani, which made the decision to go with Jordan even more surprising as your first champion who's trying to establish the title. As we discussed Sunday night, right after Battleground, it just did not make sense. And I do not mean to pile on her. She seems like an awesome woman, and it's cool that she's a big-time babyface and that people are getting behind her. It was a really strange decision to go with her taking the title off the jump. Mi Chin later told the Good Brothers that she was granted a North American Championship match by Ava, given her win over Parker, so that should come next week, I think, but sometime soon. There was footage of a Sol Ruka vlog where she visited UFC Apex and made her own gear. It was probably the most personal look we've actually gotten at her to date, and it definitely garnered her some babyface momentum. Another quick moment from the show had Brooks Jensen run out of the crowd to grab Vic Joseph's arm while on commentary, shaking him up. Now, we never actually saw Jensen, and it was treated like it was an unscripted, crazy moment, and Booker T and Vic both wanted that person arrested. So clearly he'll be back on screen sooner than later. Wes Lee and New Catch Republic fought Gallus. This was set up Monday with the Brits telling Wes they'd get his back and teach Gallus another lesson given their long history. The size differential here was almost 2-1. Tyler Bate did the airplane spin on Mark Coffey, and I think for the first time I can remember, he actually got dizzy because of it. That would happen to me every single time I did it. Wes did a step-up Hurricanrana off Wolfgang and a tornado DDT to him. There were a series of topes before Wes hit Joe Coffey with a Meteora. Then Wes decided to take out the heels ringside rather than take Joe and finish him. That left him open for all the best for the bells, back inside with Gallus getting the win. Some sequences in this bout were absolutely superb. There's such a huge difference when there's a match in NXT and every single person has experience, as one would expect. Gallus over Wes was the right move, putting Lee in a position where he needs to continue scratching and clawing, fighting from under. And it was nice to see New Catch back down in NXT. I gave this probably like a 3.75 star, 3.5. Same thing with Spears and Evans. Both just really good matches. All three of those matches were quality on this show. Bate was telling Nathan Frazier and Axiom that they should enjoy their tag team title defense from Battleground. D'Angelo family came in talking shit about the Heritage Cup, which Bate and Pete Dunne took offense to. Frazier got distracted by the Heritage Cup's presence, with Axiom trying to focus him, given they're still the tag champions. I could definitely see this as like a multi-week feud where Frazier fails going after the cup. The family uses that as a reason to get a tag team title shot. There's a lack of teams that have yet like true quality reasons to challenge for the titles. So moving them up would make sense. Stax and Luca Crucifino, in the 2 matches they've had together, they actually looked pretty impressive, like a tag team that could last for a good period of time. The Chase U men all argued in the classroom, with Andre Chase and Ridge Holland not understanding why this hasn't been squashed already. Duke Hudson and Riley Osborne offered no explanation for continuing to be assholes. Thea Hale came in and just laid down the law, told them all to shut the fuck up and sit down. She read Chase, Hudson, and Osborne the riot act, saying Chase U gives everyone a chance and they need to get on the same page. This was a nice turn of events. Thea did really well making a serious turn and not taking any shit from the guys. I loved it. Brindley Reese fought Wendy Chu. The guys boosted Reese backstage, but cautioned that Chu appeared to be different from last time we saw her. And indeed she was. Wendy had black, tight pajamas with skulls on them, makeup stitches on her mouth, much darker eye makeup, and a more foreboding kind of spooky overall energy. She still carried the body pillow. This time it was a black pillowcase, but she didn't have an eye mask anymore, or slippers, or the drink like she did in the past. She attacked right at the bell and hit a basement flatliner. Then Wendy brutalized Brindley with a lariat and put her to sleep with basically the same setup as Jinder Mahal's Kalash, but with leg scissors and a submission instead of like a slam. Carly Bright tried to introduce herself to Chu later backstage, but got freaked out by her. This was a great return for Chu. I'm not sure I understand the gimmick concept. It could use some explanation in a vignette or two. Is she a sleep paralysis demon? Did she simply wake up on the wrong side of the bed? Because if so, that's kind of funny. Like, tell me more about this. The positive is that it allowed her to actually use her full repertoire of wrestling moves and not be shorthanded like she was in the old gimmick. Definitely an improvement overall because of how much she gets to wrestle now. It's overall great to have her back on TV, and I think she can be a serious part of the division. In terms of people, criticizing, oh, it's another spooky gimmick in professional wrestling. Look, there's like 400 wrestlers between the two main companies. If 2% of them have some kind of spooky, evil, whatever gimmick, it's fine. Like, her gimmick is clearly different than what Tatum Paxley is doing, or than what House of Black is doing, or what Uncle Howdy Nightbird and the new group is going to do when it debuts Monday on Raw. Like, it's fine for her to have her own thing and for it to be a little bit dark and mysterious and whatever the hell else it is. Eddie Thorpe fought Tavian Heights. This was also the return match for Thorpe, who was deeper into the Native American motif with wide black face paint across his eyes like a blindfold. Thorpe hit his elbow and basically a paradigm shift for the win. It was fine. Nothing else to say on it, really. Charlie Dempsey, watching backstage, thought Heights impressed in the match and told Miles Bourne to go get him because there's strength in numbers. Damon Kemp wasn't for it. Dempsey pointed out that he just went 0-2 against Tony D'Angelo and was in no position to question him. This wasn't really as comedic as it was last week where I super enjoyed it, but Tavian has been hanging around there doing absolutely nothing for probably a year or so. So it's a nice opportunity for him. And if they get him in the group, I'd be kind of curious to see how he interacts with the other 3 guys. Now, as we make the transition from NXT to AEW, again, we don't do this every week. Every once in a while we do. We're going to have a very brief ratings discussion, both because of NXT and AEW. So NXT on Tuesday did 718,000 viewers with a 0.22 demo. What's notable about that is that it was number 1 for the night on cable, which almost never happens for NXT. Now, that viewership number of 718,000 is certainly not what they expected, probably, with Cody on the show. But NXT was actually at 763,000 viewers for the first 5 quarter hours before the Cody in-ring segment ended. At that point, it dropped 100,000 viewers immediately and 150,000 overall. Now, this should be a learned lesson for NXT because Cody still appeared in 2 segments after his in-ring left, after that was over. But we as viewers were not told that he would remain on the show and that we should stick around. All Cody had to do was say, I have some business to take care of backstage before the show is out, or something to that effect. And I bet NXT would have actually retained a large portion of those viewers. What was also super interesting is that the demo, which is generally the way ratings are ranked based on what's the number 1 show on cable, for example, NXT was number 1 with a 0.22, not with their 718,000. The demo was actually lower for those first 5 quarter hours than it was the latter 4. That includes the overrun, so 3 plus an extra. And that is super interesting. Now, I don't know how to differentiate that for you. I don't know why that went up. It's very tough to say, but that is pretty much what happened when it comes to NXT. Now, because we got to tape the show late today, AEW's ratings did come in as well. And they were at 681,000 viewers and a 0.23 demo. Now, they, unlike NXT, went up against the NBA Finals, which took out clearly at least a little bit of their viewership. It's also the fourth time, though, since April that AEW has been below 700,000 just from a viewership number. And I believe the third time that they've been around 0.23 as a demo, which is low for them. Now, you're going to see on social media, on Reddit, whoever else, people saying NXT beat AEW or AEW beat NXT. And as I've told you on this podcast, on our Twitter account at Getting Overcast, etc., these shows are not going head to head. And if shows are not going head to head, then no one is beating anyone else. You could say that NXT this week had a larger viewership than AEW did. That is true. You could say this week that AEW still had a better demo than NXT did. And that's not only true, but especially when you consider AEW was up against the NBA Finals. But these shows are not in competition with one another. They're literally not fighting for the same viewers because they're not on the same night. So that's the tribalistic bullshit that we try not to talk about here on the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. At the same time, it is notable that AEW and NXT are doing similar numbers these days. And it's not just when there's NBA Finals competition. Even in other weeks, they're often not far from 100,000 viewers or a couple hundredths of a demo point away from one another. AEW at a period of time, their demo was competing with Raw. They were putting a demo forth where you said, oh, wow, they might have a higher demo than Raw this week. You'll remember Chris Jericho, the demo god, and all that type of shit. The fact that they're now not even coming close to doing that, and they're actually just kind of competing when it comes to an average number, let's say, with NXT. I hate to use the word competing because I just told you they're not in competition. I'm trying to think of a better turn of phrase for it. When they're able to be compared closer to NXT than they are with Raw, that's obviously not a good thing. So those are the ratings for this week. You know, I don't look at that AEW number as particularly bad. The last time they did a number like that was May 15th. It was 762 and 0.23. And 3 weeks after that, meaning last week, they were at 790 and a 0.28. So way higher. So I'm sure once the NBA Finals are over, their numbers will be back up in the 700 range consistently. But really the question is, are they ever going to get back to what they were doing? That demo number that was consistently 0.34, 0.3. You know, they're much lower than that on a week-to-week basis right now. Once the NBA playoffs are over, once the NHL playoffs are over, we'll see what happens. With that said, let's go ahead and move into our full breakdown of AEW. Now, as I said earlier, I have been sick all week, and I had to watch 5 hours of AEW in a very short period of time. So from an energy standpoint, I wasn't able to fully break it down the way I normally do, but I still have plenty of coverage to offer here. Just basically saying that it's going to be a little shorter than usual. And my hope, fingers crossed, because I watched the shows, was that nothing that I watched would piss me off. And luckily this week, it didn't. There was nothing that got me angry. There were some things certainly I didn't like, but nothing that got me angry. In terms of the matches and how they were built, 3 of 17 this week had storyline relevance or direct build. I'm going to be generous and increase that to 4 of 17, as one of them for me was on the edge, on the border. That's still 24%. It's among the lowest that we've calculated to this end. And that's obviously problematic. I watched Rampage and Collision, and I was just like, why am I giving these shows time at this point? Like, what is the benefit to me as a viewer to watch these shows? I can't find one. And it's really frustrating that it's 3 hours a week of television. The majority of their TV doesn't really seem to matter that much. So let's kick it off with Dustin Rhodes versus Johnny TV. I'm serious. We're going to start with that, and there's a reason for it. They had a very rough 10-minute match. Rhodes avoided Starship Pain, hit Final Reckoning for the win. Tony Schiavone called it Crossroads. I don't know if he even watches the product. No. Dustin then cut a meandering promo saying AEW has the best cameraman and explained that he was angry at Jack Perry for beating up his boss, the man who pays him, and that disgusted him. Then he tried to do a part of his father's Hard Times promo, Data. He couldn't decide whether Jack's problem was that he was spoiled, he didn't work hard, or that he's a follower and not a leader. Then he promised to destroy him on Dynamite, staking his career on Perry being unable to beat him fair and square. High effort, moderate success promo-wise, way, way, way too long for a random TV singles match with an obvious outcome. Also, don't say that you're going to bet your career on something unless you're actually putting your career on the line. On Rampage, the Acclaimed beat a couple jobbers who were wearing face paint. Max Caster actually switched up his flow a little bit for the first time in a long time, and that was cool. But again, why am I telling you this? It's because of what happened on Dynamite. Swerve Strickland opened the show, putting over Will Ospreay's talent, but saying he's not a killer like him. He then shaded the EVPs for not being fighting champions, so the Elite interrupted with Kazuchika Okada saying it's his house. Nick Jackson bragged about taking out Kenny Omega and Eddie Kingston and winning Anarchy in the arena. Then he issued an open blood and guts challenge. Matt asked if Swerve would stand with them or against them. He declined in a convoluted manner. Acclaimed prevented an attack. Then Christopher Daniels came out and told everyone to go backstage. The crowd went from somewhat hype to dead as soon as CD came out. So you're telling me Blood and Guts is going to be the Elite versus Swerve and Acclaimed with each team getting a fifth guy? That is just not exciting. Swerve and Okada in that match, definitely interesting. Everyone else, not so much. On Dynamite, Rhodes fought Perry in a TNT qualifier. Dustin bladed seconds into the match. He did the bionic elbow and actually hit Crossroads this time. Perry put him headfirst into an exposed turnbuckle, then DDT'd him on exposed concrete for a 9 count. Each low-blowed the other behind the referee's back. Dustin flipped Jack the Bird 4 different times in the match, and Perry won with a running knee. Perry then kept touching Dustin's blood and wiping it on himself. It was fine. It went as expected other than, the blading, though obviously that's not exactly surprising. My thought was, if you're trying to build up Jack Perry, and look, I know Dustin is a veteran. He's also 55 years old, and you're trying to put Jack over in a major way, and you needed an exposed turnbuckle, exposed concrete, and then a running knee, and that's how you end the match. It didn't come off well for me. CD then later announced that Okada and the Young Bucks will wrestle in eliminator matches that could put their titles on the line if they lose. There'll be no outside interference, with everyone barred from ringside. So eliminator matches are hardly unique. It's kind of a smart stipulation to seemingly put the odds against the Elite, but if Swerve is speaking for AEW and Tony Khan can book whatever matches he wants, then why wouldn't he just put them in title matches? In fact, why wouldn't he just put them in title matches every single week until they lose the titles? Right? Isn't that what would make sense? Dynamite was main evented by the International Championship match. Will Ospreay against Rey Fenix. Ospreay fully flipped out of a Hurricanrana off the ropes. Fenix fully no-sold a Tornado DDT. This was common throughout the match. Ospreay hit an air raid crash driver, and much later an Oz cutter. Fenix countered Hidden Blade with a Hurricanrana cover. Then Ospreay caught Fenix rolling with a Hidden Blade. He hit Swerve Stomp after looking at Swerve, who was sitting in the crowd, and saying, "My house," and then hit Hidden Blade again for the win. Fenix was sitting up, looking at Ospreay like a moron for probably 45 seconds as this happened. Swerve then entered the ring, but he refused to shake an extended hand from Ospreay, saying this is not a game. Then he started screaming in his face, so Ospreay swiped the AEW title and put it on his shoulder, along with the international title on the other shoulder. Swerve took it back and said in his ear, "You're lucky we're still friends. Anyone else, I'd put them in a grave." So is Swerve back heel now? I don't even have the energy to get into that. As far as the match goes, dare I say it was disappointing? Don't get it twisted. Straight up awesome wrestling sequences from these two guys. And it was nice that Fenix was protected with 2 finishers plus an impact move. It's just that I thought this was going to completely blow me away. And instead it was super fun and enjoyable. Maybe that's my fault for having such high expectations, but that's how I felt coming out of it. I was on the border of 3.75 stars B+ and a 4-star A-. I guess because I gave those NXT matches 3.75, I'll give this a 4, just by direct comparison. But they were all good for totally different reasons. This was athleticism and impressiveness, but not really match story or anything to sink your teeth into. The Swerve Ospreay interaction was intense. It added necessary juice for their match, given they're going to main event Forbidden Door. It was probably one of the best ends to an episode of Dynamite in a long time. Ospreay did look good with both titles on his shoulders. That may have been done to add some more belief to the viewer of him actually winning, but it actually had the opposite effect on me. I don't think you do that if you're having him win the title. Now, I'm actually quite confident Swerve is going to walk out of Forbidden Door as champion, and that is ultimately the right decision if they do it. Will just joined AEW. There's probably an easy out for him with the Don Callis family, among other possible ways that match can end. So we'll get to that in a couple weeks, but that's how I felt coming out of this. On Dynamite, Roosh beat a jobber in a minute, grabbed the mic, shit on America, and was ready to hit a second bull's horns on the jobber when MJF entered, so I guess he's a babyface protecting a regular guy. They exchanged blows, then teamed up to clear the ring of security, and then fought each other through the crowd. This went backstage with them throwing shit at each other, and MJF tackling Roosh through a table. They were separated by about 8 dudes each, and it was immediately announced that a match between them will kick off next week's Dynamite commercial-free. During the brawl in the ring, it looked like Roosh maybe dislocated his shoulder, hurt his hand or something, but he was able to finish the entire fight. This was a well put together brawl. My only question was, why do they hate each other so much? We know Roosh's motivation. He felt like his return was overshadowed by that of MJF. All we heard from MJF last week was culture-based insults about Roosh being Mexican and speaking Spanish, which was rich for someone who always talks about, being subjugated for being Jewish. So I'm not sure the intensity fit the story, but it was good overall. And these two will probably put on a hell of a match next week. Obviously, MJF is going to win. Talk about predictable. And my guess is that once he beats Roosh, he'll get, like he kind of predicted, a random CMLL wrestler to fight at Forbidden Door. I guess so. On Collision, Claudio Castagnoli and Wheeler Yuta fought FTR to a 20-minute time limit draw. Claudio ate Shatter Machine for a delayed and botched broken fall. There were alternate stereo sharpshooters at one point. Claudio did a superplex and neutralizer on Cash Wheeler, then put him in a crossface and Rings of Saturn as time expired. Dax Harwood demanded 5 more minutes, so Brandon Cutler came out with a contract saying that's not what was stipulated. So they beat him up. So now the Young Bucks have a mouthpiece for no reason, and Cutler is able to make decisions in addition to the other 6 people who are already involved in this. Beyond this, Dax announced on Twitter that he and FTR as a whole are going on an extended break because he has an injury, something that he had to know about when he cut that promo a week ago, 2 weeks ago, that they were going to rematch the Elite. So I guess that's not happening now. On Dynamite, the TBS Championship was on the line. Yes, really. Mercedes Moné fighting Zeusis. This was announced on Collision. And while random, the match actually made sense because Zeusis is the partner of Stephanie Van Kerr, who Mercedes is fighting at Forbidden Door. However, while them fighting made sense, it made 0 sense for her to be getting a TBS title match ahead of her partner. Why could this not have just been a singles match? Straight up dumb. Vanker got a brief promo before the match as well. There was a really brief but real CEO chant for the first time in a while, I think. Zeusis did an awesome double underhook lung blower. Seconds later, Mercedes countered her into Monet Maker. Well wrestled. Mercedes has knocked whatever rust that she had off. I went 3.5 stars and a B here. Just super entertaining. On Rampage, Mina Shirakawa beat Serena Deeb in what I'd call a pretty disappointing match just compared to expectation. It was messy, a lot of communication issues. Mariah May came out to hug and celebrate with Mina, so Toni Storm came down and Mariah got them to reluctantly shake hands. Then they held the ropes for her. I realized here that Mina's theme is a total ripoff of Danza Kudrow, the song that you probably know from Fast and Furious 5. I can't get it out of my head whenever I hear it. This was such a typical AEW booking, though, to give someone a random title match and then give them a strong singles win after the match is already made. It was also curious to have Mina beat Serena, who they spent months building up. She lost to Storm, and now she just loses easily to Mina Shirakawa. I mean, it's ridiculous. On Collision, Storm fought Lady Frost in a non-title match. Tony did a promo for this match on Rampage, but there was no reason for it being set. She won with Storm 0, and then she sat May on the apron saying she loves her, so as champion, she's demanding that Mariah be entered into the Owen. And then they hugged. Match was nothing. May winning the Owen would make a lot of sense. On Dynamite, there was a video package that taught us a little bit about Mina and had Mariah explain why they were such close friends. It was done in like a Japanese video style, and it was probably the best one of these that AEW has ever done. Then we saw Tony petting Mariah's head when May explained that she was going to host a contract signing between them next week. On Collision, Chris Statlander beat Robin Renegade in 95 seconds. She had a new theme. Her presentation looked better than it sounded. Stokely Hathaway put Stat over after the bell, saying she'll be the first woman to win both singles titles in AEW, and he also said she will be the first entrant in the Owen. This was fine overall. Willow Nightingale later said she was entering the Owen as well. She wanted to defend the cup. There were 3 women's matches held over the weekend. Again, all 3 of them featuring non-contracted talents. I believe that's the second week in a row that was the case. On Collision, Orange Cassidy fought Kyle O'Reilly. Roderick Strong interrupted an O'Reilly interview saying he looked good, but not great since returning. He said he feels like someone is missing and told O'Reilly to remember what he told him upon returning. Strong and Kingdom stood over the barricade and whispered advice to Kyle during the match. Cassidy won as expected after 2 orange punches. This was the main event, a nice bookend with BCC and FTR from an in-ring standpoint. Trent Beretta and Kyle Fletcher attacked Orange after the bell, so O'Reilly saved, and they got beaten down. Then Stat came down and shook Trent's hand, then Willow saved. So we have a random 3-person babyface team for, I presume, a mixed tag team match coming up soon. It was announced via video package that Orange and Zack Sabre Jr. were rematching at Forbidden Door this year. Their first match was good. Didn't need it again. It was also announced on Dynamite that New Japan's Shingo Takagi will compete in the Owen this year. Huge addition from an in-ring talent standpoint. Seems like he's definitely going to fight Bryan Danielson during the tournament. That would be my expectation. Kind of surprising just given how AEW has rated the New Japan roster and this not being a Forbidden Door, but just glad he's in the match. On Dynamite, Cassidy, O'Reilly, and Mark Briscoe fought Strong, Fletcher, and Konosuke Takeshita. So Briscoe randomly being the third as a babyface, it's fine to me because he randomly tags with everyone and anyone who needs an extra person. He also had a really high energy promo that got the viewer, me, hyped up. Strong being involved made no sense because he hasn't turned on O'Reilly and he should not want to be fighting his friend. And then you have Takeshita instead of Beretta. Why? Trent was ringside. Commentary admitted that it was odd. Offered no explanation. Don Callis on commentary gave no reason. Strong started, O'Reilly tagged in, Strong tagged out. Briscoe had a fantastic hot tag, super fun. Also unique, just given the way tagging did not matter at all in the match. Fletcher did a turnbuckle brainbuster on Orange, then beat Briscoe with a pile driver. Trent and the Heels attacked after the bell. O'Reilly argued with Undisputed Kingdom. Willow's music hit, but Stat attacked her on the stage. This was a rare win for Fletcher on AEW TV and an interesting decision because Briscoe is the ROH champion. O'Reilly being good enough to not beat on Strong after the bell made his inclusion make even less sense. The match overall was immensely chaotic and entertaining, but it was move after move, and that was pretty much it. On Collision, Daniel Garcia beat someone named Tate Mayfairs in 3 minutes. The idea is that he's being built up for this Ospreay challenge, but he's beaten 4 jobbers, 2 signed to AEW, and 2 just random talents. He told us that AEW is where the best wrestle, and it's for the sickos. Jeez. Then on Dynamite, Garcia beat Nick Camarado, remember him, in another squash. So now he's beaten 5 jobbers. This time, Ospreay and MJF watched his match backstage and were impressed. They're impressed with him beating 5 jobbers. Ospreay's out here going up against Ray Phoenix. MJF's about to fight Roosh. Garcia's beaten nobody. He's done nothing to earn a number 1 contendership for the international title. I mean, Ray Phoenix didn't either, but Garcia's done nothing. So I just don't get it. On Collision, the premier athletes beat 2 jobbers in 50 seconds. Later, Samoa Joe spoke with Hook about lacrosse, while Katsuyori Shibata supposedly taped them with a camera. They entered a locker room and attacked the athletes for 10 seconds and then left. Then on Dynamite, they did a similar camera segment talking about Taz liking the color orange. The idea being that Joe is trying to relate to Hook, and there are a couple normal guys who turn it on and get violent once they open the door. Very similar to Jules and Vincent in Pulp Fiction, if you want a comparison. So then on Dynamite, Joe and Hook fought the athletes. Hook did the walkaway spot like Joe. He won with Red Rum, and Joe had a coquina clutch locked in simultaneously. Shibata also choked out Mark Sterling. So they're clearly being built as a trio, a pretty fun trio. And I find them interesting. I find them entertaining. Joe does comedy well. That matches what Shibata's currently doing. Hook could use as much personality around him as possible. So I would not be surprised if these guys end up with a trios title match against Bang Bang Gang, maybe even beat them and win those titles eventually. On Rampage, Gates of Agony beat Private Party with their tandem lift powerbomb. Maybe AEW is actually trying to do something with these guys. They have a good look overall, but beating Private Party is nothing. On Rampage, the Learning Tree interrupted commentary to give Matt Menard pointers on commentary. He said that he was an authority, Jericho did, because he won an award from the Wrestling Observer. Then he got TV time on Dynamite. Jericho gave advice to Iowans on how to grow corn. Then Private Party came out to zero, and I mean zero reaction. Jericho showed them how to properly climb the top rope. Then they tripped him, and they cleared the ring. They completely missed a Swanton bomb, but perfectly hit a shooting star press. This was painful and boring. Private Party are awful on the mic. And if the Learning Tree gimmick is going to work, it needs to have higher quality foils than guys like this. On Dynamite, Pac said it's been humiliating to return to AEW and lose every match. He's supposed to be a bastard, but he feels like a bitch. He's angry now, though, because I guess he wasn't before. And he's entering the Owen. So this field, strong as hell. He won't be winning it, but man, that's quite an Owen field so far. On Rampage, Shane Taylor Promotions backstage called out Top Flight and Action Andretti, but they didn't actually give a reason for doing so. They just named them as potential opponents. Odd segment. On Collision, we found out that Dante Martin and Lee Moriarty are fighting in a TNT qualifier. Lee Moriarty has not won an AEW TV singles match since September 2022. And that match was against Fuego del Sol. Dante hasn't won a TV singles match in AEW since May 2022. That was against Max Caster. What are we doing here? Why are these guys even in consideration for the TNT title? Oh, Taylor also said Andretti was the only one of the three worth anything, so maybe he turns heel and joins them. I don't know. On Rampage, Bang Bang Gang beat three jobbers handily. Interestingly, Juice Robinson was the third here. He did all the work. Jay White wasn't in the match, even though he's part of the trio's champions. White introduced all three of them, which was funny because Austin Gunn doesn't have a nickname like everyone else on the team does. White then announced that Juice is 1/4 of the trio's champions as the guys all strap their titles to him. So they're free-birding the titles. Just could have done the segment without the match. On Dynamite, Bang Bang Gang cut a promo on House of Black for really no reason that I could tell. Heels calling out a team of legitimate heels that can easily take the titles off them for no reason. Why? I can't tell you. This is so frequent in AEW, where if there's not zero setup for a match, the only setup is, hey person, let's fight, without any rhyme or reason for it. It's just pure laziness at this point. Also, I hate to say it, but Bang Bang Gang is just their worst with Juice back. His voice makes me want to plug my ears. There is no part of his gimmick that I enjoy. On Rampage, Penta El Zero Miedo beat The Butcher in what was, frankly, a terrible match. Easily the worst I've ever seen Penta wrestle, either in the United States or Mexico. Obviously, I've only seen so many of his matches in Mexico. Not his fault totally, but big yikes on this match. And then on Collision, Scorpio Sky got his third or fourth promo saying he's going to be our hero and our champion, and it's time for us to come together and reach the stars. That was it. Shivani told us his words were interesting, and he's one of the greats. The words were not interesting, and he's not one of the greats. And that wraps up AEW this week. Like I said, Collision and Rampage largely worthless. Dynamite, the matches were quality. Some solid storytelling, especially when it came to the main event with Ospreay and Swerve. A lot of the show I could have done without. It wasn't the best watch. I think next week with MJF and Roosh kind of kicking things off, that's going to be pretty exciting. It's going to be interesting to see what else they build. Now they have Blood and Guts coming up. It's going to be, I believe, in late July in Nashville, Tennessee. So they're going to be building to that shortly after they have Forbidden Door. Obviously, their next pay-per-view coming on the back end of that as well. The Owen Tournament. There's a lot of stuff going on simultaneously in AEW. It kind of feels like that time, I think it was last fall, where there were like 100 things happening at once, and like it was kind of tough to compartmentalize them all. Hopefully they have a better and easier time at doing it in this situation, but certainly we will see what it looks like going forward. So folks, that is the end of our NXT and AEW show. A reminder that in your podcast feed, we have your WWE Clash at the Castle Ultimate Preview. You are not going to want to miss that ahead of the premium live event this Saturday. Of course, Saturday, as soon as WWE Clash at the Castle goes off the air, we will have an instant analysis podcast for you. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at GettingOvercast for episode drops, news analysis, highlights, all of that good stuff. It also will allow you, if you follow us there, to vote in our pre- and post-show polls surrounding WWE Clash at the Castle. Of course, we will use your input when it comes to our pre and post show grade conversations on that instant analysis. Please also remember,
it's all about Defy.
So head over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify, leave a 5-star rating on Apple, take a little extra time, leave a 5-star written review. If you do, we will read it live right here on the show. And don't forget,
I happen to love the number 5.
And I hope you do as well, because for $5 a month or $50 for the entire year, you can become an official Getting Overhead. Just visit buymeacoffee.com/gettingover, sign up. You will get bonus audio, instant reactions to every major show each week, along with exclusive news posts on Friday. Again, that is buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. All right. Thank you all for listening to this edition of the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. We will be back with you on Saturday. At this point, it is time for the Silver King to sign off and leave you with just 3 final words. Bye for now.